stage of the muscle-bound epic, when cinematic ambition was measured in sweat and sculpted granite, one film dared to ask not just about the cost of conquest, but about the price of a god's favor. Conan the Destroyer. The 1984 successor to the foundational barbarian saga is more than a simple quest for treasure. It is a masterclass in the economics of mythological scale, a case study in how a studio, having validated a new genre with the first film, allocates capital for the second. The original Conan the Barbarian was a high-risk, Ote-driven gamble, a violent, operatic R&D prototype that proved an audience existed for a new kind of fantasy, one built not on whimsy but on the brutal logic of a prehistoric world. Its success created an asset, the character of Conan, portrayed by Arnold Schwarzenegger, a human monument whose very silhouette was now an appreciating brand. Conan the Destroyer represents the next phase, the scaling of that prototype. The mandate shifts from pure artistic proof of concept to manageable profit, from establishing a world to exploiting its IP. The budget, an estimated $18 million, signals this shift. It is not a blank check for Auteur's vision, but a calculated investment in a now-proven formula, with funds allocated for broader spectacle, a larger ensemble, and a tone consciously lightened to access a wider, younger market, a strategic pivot in audience targeting. This is a film as a corporate sequel, engineered for return. Yet, within that engineering, the film grapples with profound questions of power, identity, and sacrifice. It presents a Conan no longer solely driven by revenge, but by a promised reward so immense it would rewrite his destiny, the resurrection of his lost love. The protagonist becomes a contractor, his immense physical capital, his strength, his endurance, his combat skill, bid upon by a queen with divine ambitions. The journey is no longer a personal vendetta. It is a dangerous freelance gig, a series of calculated risks taken for a life-altering payout. The film's core tension lives in this very contract. Can a force of nature like Conan be employed? Can his primal, self-determined will be channeled into the service of another's theological scheme? The narrative explores the opportunity cost of such a bargain. What does he surrender in autonomy for this chance at a miracle? This is the psychology of the sequel hero, transformed from an origin story into a marketable professional, his internal journey now mirrored by the external pressure of franchise expectation. We open not in a forge of vengeance, but in a temple of negotiation. Conan, the wandering mercenary, is approached by Queen Tiamis, a ruler whose power is secure but whose legacy is barren. She offers a transactional dream: protect a virginal niece, the Princess Jenna, on a sacred quest to retrieve a mythical horn, and she will use the artifact's magic to bring Conan's love, Valeria, back from the dead. The proposition is pure behavioral economics. It targets Conan's deepest, most irrational want, a one that overrides all rational assessment of the mission's danger. Tiamis is not buying his loyalty. She is leveraging his most profound emotional debt. She understands that for a man who has conquered armies, the one unconquerable foe is time and loss. Her offer is a venture capital pitch for his soul, with a down payment paid in hope. This setup frames the entire adventure as a complex delivery pipeline. The product is the horn. The client is the queen. The project manager is Conan. The team he assembles, the thief Malik, the warrior woman Zula, the wizard Akiro, is a classic startup roster, specialized talent pool for a single, high-stakes launch. Their journey across deserts, into castles, and through mystical realms is a project timeline, fraught with technical hurdles, security systems in the form of guards, quality assurance tests in the form of magical traps, and competitor interference in the form of a rival warlord. Every fight is a budget overrun in blood and effort. Every narrow escape is a risk mitigation strategy succeeding against the odds. The film's visual language, while often dismissed as mere spectacle, is a deliberate document of mid-80s practical production technology. The sprawling sets of Shedazar's palace and the dreamlike crystal chamber are not just backdrops. They are massive allocations of studio capital, physical infrastructure built to create a tangible world before the digital age. The creature effects, from the monstrous Dago to the ethereal Mirror Man, represent the pinnacle of pre-CGI puppetry and makeup investment. Each is a bespoke piece of engineering, a cost center justified by its need to generate audience wonder, the emotional currency of the fantasy genre. The film's lighter tone, its infusion of comedy through Malik, is itself a marketing and distribution decision. By reducing the grim severity of the first film, the producers aimed to lower the age ratings barrier to entry, directly impacting ticket sales. This is not an artistic accident. It is a calibrated adjustment to the product based on market feedback from Barbarian. It is the difference between a niche luxury good and a mass market product. The screenplay becomes a blueprint for accessible mythological entertainment. At the heart of it all is Schwarzenegger's Conan, a study in the economics of screen presence. His dialogue is sparse, deliberate, each line a high-value asset because his physicality does 90% of the communicative work. He is not paid by the word. He is paid by the impact of his image. In Destroyer, he learns to work within an ensemble, his monolithic performance becoming the stable foundation around which more overtly comedic and expressive characters can orbit without collapsing the film's heroic gravity. He is the equity that underwrites the entire venture. The first half of Conan the Destroyer functions with the lean efficiency of a well-funded startup's first product sprint. Its objective is clear: acquire the key components of the horn. The narrative moves with a disciplined, almost modular pace, each sequence a deliverable that advances the plot while testing the team's capacity and cohesion. This is not meandering fantasy. This is project management disguised as adventure. The initial team assembly is a brilliant case study in complementary skill allocation. Conan provides brute force solutioning and leadership authority. Malik, the thief, represents low-cost, high-agility infiltration capability. Zula, the exiled warrior, brings specialized close-quarters combat expertise and cultural knowledge of hostile territories. The wizard Akiro, reluctantly recruited, is the team's R&D and unconventional problem-solving department, a walking repository of arcane data and contingency protocols. Together, they form a minimally viable product team for supernatural acquisition. Their first major task is a retrieval of the first component, a gem from the forehead of a dreaming god. This sequence is a masterclass in production-led stakes. The location is a haunted, isolated castle, a sunk cost of ancient architecture now repurposed as a divine prison. The challenge is not merely combat, it is a puzzle of restraint and timing. They must navigate a hole of mirrors, a literal and metaphorical reflection on illusion and identity, where the greatest threat is their own multiplied, aggressive reflections. The scene's technology is elegantly simple yet profoundly effective. Real mirrors, real actors, and carefully choreographed camera angles to sell the infinite recursion. The capital investment here is in time and precision, not digital effects. The cost of a mistake is a shattered illusion, breaking the scene's dreamlike contract with the audience. Conan's solution is pure, applied physical logic. He shatters the mirrors, destroying the infinite reflections in a cascade of breaking glass, a violent, cathartic release of pent-up risk. It is a moment of problem-solving that speaks to his core competency. When faced with complex, deceptive system, apply overwhelming force to its physical infrastructure. The financial metaphor is direct. Sometimes the most elegant solution to a tangled web of derivatives is a decisive, foundational collapse. The acquisition of a gem from the slumbering god Dagoth introduces the film's central theme of sacrifice and betrayal. The queen's instructions were clear: do not awaken the god. But the environment is inherently unstable, a high-risk work site. The sleeping deity is a volatile asset, and the team's very presence introduces catastrophic liability. When Dagoth awakens, it represents a project risk event materializing. The ensuing battle is a brutal allocation of resources. Zula and Conan engage directly, expending their combat energy, while Malik and Akiro scramble for the gem, operating on a separate, high-precision track. The death of Akiro's apprentice in this clash is the project's first major cost overrun paid not in gold, but in human capital. It is a loss that etches the true price of the venture into the emotional ledger of the team, a debt that will silently accrue interest against the Queen's promise. This loss functions as an emotional anchoring point. It transforms a quest from a purely transactional mercenary job into a mission now tinged with personal vendetta and mourning. The team's psychology shifts from hired guns to invested survivors. The film then seamlessly transitions to its next phase, escorting the Princess Jenna to the mystical Lake of Taze. This leg of the journey is a test of logistical endurance and adaptive security. Traveling through open landscapes, they are vulnerable to competitor ambush, in this case, the forces of the warlord Togra, who also seeks the Horn. The ambush sequence is a dynamic analysis of defensive versus offensive tactics. Conan's team is outnumbered, a classic startup facing a larger, entrenched competitor. Their response is not to meet force with equal force, but to leverage their environmental advantages and specialized skills. They use the terrain, the element of surprise in their counterattacks, and the unique abilities of each team member to create a disproportionate impact. Zula's nets disarm multiple foes at once, a force multiplier technology. Conan's strength turns a wagon into a devastating weapon, a repurposing of assets under pressure. This is entrepreneurial warfare, doing more with less, turning constraints into creative advantages. The interpersonal dynamics during this travel sequence are the film's human resource management subplot. Jenna's maturation from a sheltered, ritual-bound girl into a curious young woman mirrors the development of a raw, promising talent within a high-pressure project. Her awakening interest in Conan and a protective, almost paternal distance creates a fragile emotional layer over the mechanical objectives. It introduces a soft risk, the potential for mission drift. If Conan's role shifts from protector to something more complex, it could cloud his judgment, a classic leadership hazard in high-stakes environments. Malik's cowardice and greed, consistently played for comedy, serve a crucial narrative and economic function. He is the embodied spirit of short-term, self-interested profit motive. He constantly evaluates risk versus personal reward in real time, providing a cynical, ground-level commentary on the heroics of others. He is the idea of the mercenary, the part that want to cut and run with whatever valuables are at hand. His presence keeps the film's financial undercurrent visible. He reminds us that for everyone else's lofty goals of resurrection and destiny, his participation is strictly for a share of the tangible loot. He is a shareholder demanding quarterly dividends amidst a long-term growth plan. The arrival at the Lake of Taze marks the midpoint's culmination and the triggering of the story's central betrayal. The lake is presented as a site of pure mystical capital. Its waters are the necessary solvent to reveal the hidden temple that houses the Horn. The act of having the virgin princess shed a tear into the lake is a transaction of unparalleled specificity. It is a payment made in a rare, authentic emotion, sorrow, to unlock a physical gateway. This moment beautifully merges the film's mythological logic with a kind of spiritual economics. The key is not a physical object or a password, but a genuine human experience, a commodity the princess alone possesses in the required form. It is the ultimate in bespoke security systems. As the temple rises from the sands, the scale of the engineering becomes awe-inspiring. This is not a building. It is a geological event orchestrated by ancient, forgotten technology. The capital expenditure implied by its creation is incalculable, a civilization-scale investment in securing a single artifact. For Conan and his team, it represents the final, tangible milestone before delivery. The sight of the temple solidifies the reality of the Queen's promise, making the potential reward feel materially within grasp. This visual payoff is crucial for maintaining team morale and viewer investment. It is a prototype finally materializing from the CAD drawings, proof that the venture is viable. However, as they enter the temple, the narrative's contract begins to show its hidden clauses. The internal architecture is a death trap of booby traps and puzzles, a quality assurance gauntlet designed to annihilate the unworthy. Navigating it requires not just strength, but intellectual agility and trust. It is here that the team's bonds, forged on the road, are stress-tested. They must operate as a single unit, relying on each other's expertise to survive spinning blades, collapsing floors, and deceptive pathways. This sequence is a pure expression of operational synergy. No one member could succeed alone. Conan needs Malik's nimbleness to trigger pressure plates. Zula needs Conan's power to hold open massive doors. It is a beautifully orchestrated demonstration of collaborative efficiency under a life-or-death deadline. They are not just a team. They are an integrated production line, moving their most valuable asset, the princess, safely toward the final product installation point. The first half concludes with the team standing before the horn, encasing crystal at the heart of the temple. The objective is in sight. The project is on the verge of completion. The mood should be triumphant, a prelude to the payday. But the film undercuts this with a subtle, growing sense of architectural dread. The temple feels too perfect, the path to the horn suspiciously culminative. This is the calm before the contractual fine print is invoked. The team has performed their duties with exceptional effectiveness. They have managed risk, allocated their human capital wisely, and reached the deliverable. They are, in every measurable sense, successful contractors. But in the high-stakes game of dealing with royal power and divine artifacts, success in the task is only one variable in a much larger and more dangerous equation of ambition and deception. The first half has been a flawless execution of a plan they did not design. The second half will reveal the true cost of working from someone else's blueprint. The second half of Conan the Destroyer is where the agreed-upon contract dissolves and the true nature of the venture is revealed. It is a masterclass in narrative risk conversion, where the emotional and logistical investments of the first half are put through a brutal order of betrayal and renegotiation. The moment the horn is retrieved, the project success criteria are violently rewritten by the client. Queen Tarami's emissary, the guard Captain Bombata, who has shadowed the team with silent scrutiny, now executes a hidden clause: eliminate the team and bring the horn and the princess back to Shedizar alone. This is the ultimate founder's nightmare, the venture capital firm seizing the finished product and liquidating the founding team to avoid dilution of equity. Bombata's betrayal is not a personal grudge. It is a cold, premeditated business decision. Conan and his crew are now classified as liabilities. Their knowledge of the Queen's true intentions, their potential claims on the reward, and their general unpredictability represent an unacceptable operational risk to a clean, controlled endgame. The ensuing fight in the temple is a chaotic shareholder revolt. It is messy, personal, and driven by the raw instinct for survival. This clash shifts the film's primary conflict from external obstacle course navigation to internal contract enforcement. The team is no longer fighting monsters or traps. They are fighting the breach of their employment agreement. Their opponent is the very system that hired them. The battle's outcome, Bombata's retreat with the princess and the horn, leaves Conan's team stranded but alive. This is a critical moment of psychological reset. They have suffered a catastrophic business failure. The product is stolen, the client has turned hostile, and the promised reward is void. A purely transactional group would dissolve here. The fact that they do not is the film's thesis on the unexpected capital that forms in adversity, loyalty, and shared purpose. Their bond, forged in the temple's trials, has accrued a value greater than the promised gold or resurrection. This is human capital appreciating under pressure. Their decision to pursue Bombata back to Shedizar is not for payment, but for justice and to protect Jenna, who they now see as a victim, not just cargo. This pivot in motivation is the story's emotional profit, earned through shared hardship. The return to Shedizar transforms the city from a place of royal patronage to a fortress of antagonistic power. Conan must now infiltrate the very seat of the authority that hired him. This reverse engineering of the client's own infrastructure is a classic disruptive strategy. The Queen's palace, once a symbol of legitimate contracting authority, is recontextualized as a villain's lair, its opulence now evidence of corrupt capital accumulation. The team's infiltration is a lean, guerrilla operation. They have no budget, no royal warrant, only their wits and skills. They are a startup going up against the corporate headquarters. This requires a different set of tactics: stealth, deception, and precise, surgical strikes instead of open combat. Malik's skills, once used for petty theft, are now vital for national-scale espionage. Zula's ferocity is channeled into silent takedowns. Akiro's magic is used for misdirection and unlocking secure pathways. This segment highlights the versatility of their human assets when the mission parameters radically change. The film's climax converges in the Queen's sanctum as she performs a ritual. This sequence is a grand unveiling of the project's true scope, which was deliberately hidden from the contractors. The horn was never just a valuable artifact. It is the key to summoning the god Dagoth into the material world, with Jenna intended as a sacrificial vessel to house a deity. Tarami's plan is a leveraged buyout of divinity itself. She is not seeking a tool. She is seeking a merger with ultimate cosmic power. Her investment in Conan's team was merely the R&D and acquisition cost for the necessary component. The princess, her own niece, is categorized as expendable human capital, a necessary sacrifice on the balance sheet for infinite return. This revelation reframes the entire narrative. Conan was not hired for a retrieval job. He was an unwitting delivery service for an apocalyptic corporate takeover. His love for Valeria was a perfect emotional vulnerability to exploit, the psychological loophole in his otherwise formidable risk assessment defenses. The final confrontation is therefore a clash of two forms of capital. Taimis represents institutional, ritualized, ambition-driven power. She has the infrastructure, the ancient knowledge, the ceremonial control. Conan represents raw, self-determined, experimental power. He has his body, his will, his hard-won skill, and his loyal team. The ritual summons Dagoth, but not as a sleeping entity from the castle. This is Dagoth unleashed, a being of pure chaotic energy, a personification of unmanaged technological or financial leverage, a derivative monster so powerful it threatens to destroy its own creator. Taimis loses control of the asset she sought to own, a classic tale of a corporation being consumed by the speculative instrument it created. The battle against Dagoth is the film's ultimate test of its thematic engineering. It cannot be won by strength alone. Conan's previous solution, shattering the mirrors, was a physical fix for a physical illusion. Dagoth is an existential threat, a being of magic. The solution here is collaboratively intellectual and mythological. Akiro, the R&D department, provides the crucial data. The god can be harmed by its own horn, the artifact that summoned it. This is a beautiful piece of narrative logic. The tool of creation is also the tool of destruction. The product contains its own kill switch. Jenna, no longer a passive asset, actively participates, using the horn to wound Dagoth. This moment is a full transformation from protected cargo to an active stakeholder in her own destiny. The final blow, however, requires a synthesis of all the team's accumulated capital. Conan, leveraging his supreme physical strength and courage, seizes a horn from the chaos and drives it into Dagoth's essence. It is a venture capital strike, the right tool applied with decisive force at the precise point of vulnerability by the individual with the highest risk tolerance. The god's destruction is a cataclysmic system failure, resulting in the collapse of Tarami's sanctum and her death. The institutional power is literally brought down by the very foundation it compromised. The aftermath is a quiet study in post-success liquidation. The kingdom is saved, but the original contract is irredeemable. The promised reward, Valeria's resurrection, is impossible. The queen who promised it is dead, her magic illegitimate. Conan is left with a classic entrepreneur's dilemma. He succeeded beyond measure, saving a kingdom, but failed to achieve the personal objective that drove him to sign on. His payment is not the one specified. Instead, he is offered a new form of compensation. Kingship. Jenna, now queen, offers him the throne, the ultimate position of institutional power and material wealth. This is the exit offer, the acquisition of his unique skill set into the established corporate structure. Conan's refusal is the most philosophically resonant moment in the film. It is a declaration of independence over institutional security. He recognizes that the throne, for all its capital and control, would be a cage. It would trade his autonomous, self-directed life for one of administration, politics, and compromise, the very systems he just overthrew. His identity is that of a founder, not a CEO. His capital is mobile, experimental, and personal. He chooses the open road, the continued journey, the perpetual startup of his own life. His reward is his freedom, his companions, and the intangible equity of legend. He departs with Zula and Malik, his core team intact, having forged a partnership stronger than any kingdom. The second half's payoff, therefore, is not in the resurrection he sought, but in profound clarification of his own identity and the value of the alliances formed in the crucible of a broken deal. The venture did not yield the intended financial or emotional return, but it generated something perhaps more valuable: sovereignty and genuine partnership. The film concludes not with a kingdom gained, but with a self truly and defiantly owned. The psychology of Conan the Destroyer is a rugged landscape of decision-making under extreme duress, where each character operates from a distinct model of behavioral economics. Their choices are not random acts of heroism or villainy, but calculated or instinctive responses to a world where every action has a cost, every alliance a potential liability, and every promise carries a weight of future debt. At the center is Conan, a protagonist whose cognitive framework is built almost entirely on experimental data. He is not illiterate in the traditional sense. He is literate in the language of violence, survival, and material cause and effect. His psychology is that of a supremely competent tactician with a narrow but immensely deep area of expertise. The Queen's offer to resurrect Valeria bypasses his rational risk assessment protocols entirely. It targets a deep, unhealed emotional wound, a loss that represents the one problem his strength cannot solve. This makes him uniquely vulnerable to a contract that trades his measurable skills, combat, endurance, leadership, for an unverifiable, mystical outcome. His participation is a supreme act of irrational hope, an emotional investment with an astronomically high risk of default. Throughout the quest, his leadership style is decentralized and meritocratic. He does not command, he positions. He allows Malik to be Malik, leveraging his cowardice for scouting and distraction. He accepts Zula's prowess without patriarchal challenge. He defays to Akiro's knowledge in mystical matters. This reveals a sophisticated, if unspoken, understanding of human capital optimization. He creates an environment where each team member's intrinsic motivation, greed, honor, curiosity, aligns with the mission's goal, requiring minimal top-down management. His key psychological journey is the recalibration of that initial hope. When the betrayal occurs, the promised reward vanishes. A lesser man might succumb to rage or despair. Conan, however, pivots. The goal shifts from a transactional reward, resurrection, to a corrective action, stopping the Queen, saving Jenna. This pivot demonstrates immense cognitive flexibility. He writes off the sunk emotional cost of his hope and re-engages his capital, his team, his strength, toward a new, morally defendable objective. His final refusal of the throne is the ultimate expression of a fully integrated self-knowledge. He understands that his psychological architecture is built for agency, not administration. The throne is a gilded trap that would depreciate his core asset, his autonomous will. He chooses a continued uncertainty of the founder over the secure constraints of the CEO. Queen Time presents a chilling study in the psychology of absolute power and its correlation with dehumanization. Calculus is pure, cold utility. Every person in her sphere is an asset with a designated function and a disposal condition. Her niece is a sacrificial component. Conan and his team are a renewable resource, useful for acquisition, then terminable to protect intellectual property. Her ambition, to host a god, is a megalomaniacal pursuit of legacy, a desire to move from mortal ruler to eternal deity. This requires a level of risk tolerance that views the potential destruction of her entire kingdom as acceptable collateral damage for a chance at divinity. Her psychology is that of the ultimate venture capitalist, willing to bet everything, including all entrusted to her, on a single, world-altering play. Her failure is a classic tale of control illusion. She believes her ritualistic knowledge grants her dominion over the power she summons, but she fundamentally misunderstands the nature of that power. Dagoth is not a subordinate entity. It is a force of chaos. Her psychology lacks the humility for true risk management. She conflates procedure with control. Her death is a market correcting a disastrously over-leveraged position. Princess Jenna's arc is one of accelerated maturation under controlled and catastrophic conditions. Initially, her psychology is that of a sheltered, ritual-bound asset. Her value is extrinsic, defined by her bloodline and her virginity, a biological and social commodity. Her exposure to the world, to Conan's pragmatic morality, and to genuine danger catalyzes an intrinsic awakening. She begins to make choices, expressing curiosity, showing courage in the temple, and ultimately wielding the horn against Dagoth. Her transformation is from a human object to a human subject, from managed capital to an active stakeholder. By the end, she has a psychological profile of a ruler who has seen the cost of corrupted power and values the loyalty of competent allies. She offers the throne not as a trap, but as a genuine offer of shared governance, demonstrating she has learned a more humane model of leadership than her aunts. Malik, the thief, is a walking model of short-term, self-preserving behavioral economics. His every decision is a microanalysis of personal risk versus immediate reward. He is the idea of the mercenary economy. He consistently seeks the exit option, the chance to grab a handful of gems and abscond. His humor stems from the constant tension between his survival instincts and the inescapable pull of the group's gravity, usually enforced by the threat of greater danger outside it. His psychology is crucial because it provides a baseline, a moral commentary against which the other's actions are measured. He expects betrayal because, in his transactional worldview, it is a logical outcome. His gradual, reluctant integration into the team's loyalty structure is a small, quiet victory for a more complex social contract over pure self-interest. Zula's psychology is built on a foundation of honor and exile. She was cast out by her tribe, making her affiliation a choice, not an accident to birth. This makes her loyalty, once given, incredibly valuable and resilient. She joins Conan not for the queen's pay, but because he treats her as a peer warrior, acknowledging her skill and granting her agency. Her motivation is the restoration of honor and the security of a new tribe. She operates with a straightforward, tactical intelligence and emotional transparency. In the behavioral economy of the group, she is the stable, high-trust bond. Her presence ensures the team doesn't devolve into a purely mercenary arrangement. She is the embodied principle that some debts are paid in loyalty and respect, not coin. Bombata, the guard captain, represents the psychology of institutional obedience. He is not evil. He is a perfect functionary. His identity is subsumed by his role in the Queen's hierarchy. He follows orders with robotic precision, even when they mandate the murder of those he has traveled with. His psychology explores the danger of outsourcing one's moral framework to an institution. He is a human tool, his conscience a deprecated feature. His conflict with Conan is a clash between programmed duty and self-determined action. In the end, he is discarded by the very system he served absolutely, a testament to the ultimate disposable nature of pure institutional loyalty. Akiro the wizard operates on a different plane of cognition altogether. His psychology is that of the researcher, the scientist in a world of magic. He is driven by curiosity and a desire to understand the underlying systems of the universe. His participation is, initially, reluctant. He is a solo practitioner coerced into a team. However, the intellectual challenge of the quest and the direct exposure to rare magical phenomena engage his core passions. His value is his knowledge, a form of intellectual capital. He is a team's risk assessor for mystical threats, the debugger for supernatural problems. His calm, analytical demeanor provides a crucial counterbalance to the physical and emotional intensities of the others. He represents a cognitive style that seeks patterns and solutions in data and law, proving that in this world, information is a weapon and a shield. The group's collective psychology, therefore, forms a complete ecosystem. Conan provides will and direction. Zula provides honor and stable force. Malik provides cynical reality check and agility. Akiro provides knowledge and systemic thinking. Jenna evolves from protected asset to moral compass and successor. Their ability to function under the stress of betrayal and cosmic threat is a testament to the resilience of a diverse, voluntarily assembled social unit. Their triumph is not just over a monster, but over the dehumanizing, utilitarian psychology of Tiamis. They prove that a partnership built on emergent respect and shared trials holds more sustainable value than any contract enforced by fear or purchase with false promises. The film argues that the ultimate capital in a brutal and uncertain world is not gold or even power, but the resilient, adaptable psychology of a bonded team. The financial anatomy of Conan the Destroyer is a fascinating snapshot of mid-80s Hollywood franchise economics in action. With an estimated production budget of $18 million, the film was a substantial but carefully hedged investment designed to scale the success of 1982's Conan the Barbarian $20 million budget into a more broadly accessible and thus more reliably profitable enterprise. This budget allocation reveals a studio, Dino De Laurentiis, engaging in strategic portfolio management. The first film was a high-risk, auteur-driven R&D project that established the brand and the tonal template. This sequel's capital was deployed not for radical innovation, but for refinement, expansion, and market-widening adaptation. The cost centers are visibly shifted. A larger portion likely went to ensemble casting, more elaborate and varied set construction, the crystalline temple, the expansive palace interiors, and a significant increase in creature and optical effects, representing the technological capital required to compete in the burgeoning fantasy spectacle market of the era. The decision to lighten the tone from the first film's R-rated grimness to a PG-rated adventure was a direct marketing and distribution calculus. By lowering the age rating barrier, the studio aimed to capture the crucial family and teenage demographics, directly impacting potential box office scale. This was not an artistic whim. It was a deliberate repositioning of the product for maximum market penetration, trading some tonal purity for a larger addressable audience. This move had downstream effects on every aspect of production, from the reduction of graphic violence to the amplification of Malik's comedic relief. The film's domestic box office gross of approximately $31 million against its $18 million cost presents a surface-level story of moderate success. However, the true financial picture resides in the complex ecosystem of theatrical distribution, international sales, and the then-nascent home video revolution. The film's theatrical run was its public market debut, but its long-tail revenue would be generated in the private, high-margin market of VHS and cable television licensing. For a film of this genre and visual spectacle, the emerging home video market was not a secondary channel. It was a parallel, vital revenue stream that could extend its profitable lifespan for years. Its performance in video rental stores, where its adventure-friendly rating and Schwarzenegger's growing star power made it a consistent performer, would have been a critical component of its overall IOI. The film's ancillary revenue potential also included soundtrack sales, a robust, Basil Poledouris scored epic, and potential licensing for merchandise, though the latter was less developed than for contemporaneous franchises like Star Wars. The film's production was an exercise in pre-digital physical capital deployment. The budget paid for thousands of man-hours of physical labor, sculptors, mold makers, painters, and carpenters building the grandiose sets of Shedizar and the Temple. It paid for the foam, latex, and hydraulics engineering of the Dagoth creature, a bespoke piece of practical effects technology that represented a significant sunk cost for a few minutes of screen time, justified by its required wow factor. It paid for the costumes, the weapons, the horses, and the location filming in Mexico, which offered exotic landscapes at a lower cost than building everything on a soundstage. This was capital converted directly into tangible, physical assets that filled the frame. The marketing spend, while harder to pinpoint, would have followed the standard industry model of the time, a multi-million-dollar campaign focused on television spots, print ads in magazines, and theatrical trailers emphasizing spectacle and Schwarzenegger's iconic presence. The poster art, featuring the heroic tableau of the core cast, was a key marketing asset designed to communicate the film's tone and scale at a glance. The financial risk was multifaceted. The primary risk was Schwarzenegger's escalating salary and his potential availability as he became a hotter commodity. There was a creative risk of altering the franchise's tone and potentially alienating the core audience that appreciated the first film's severity. There was also market competition risk, as the 1980s were crowded with fantasy adventures, the never-ending story, the Dark Crystal, Willow. The studio's mitigation strategy was the brand equity of Conan, the proven draw of Schwarzenegger's physicality, and a deliberate toning down to access a wider demographic, a classic diversification strategy. From a distribution economic standpoint, the film's journey from studio to audience was a complex pipeline. De Laurentiis' company controlled the production, but distribution was handled by Universal Pictures. This partnership split the financial risk and reward according to a negotiated agreement, with a distributor taking a percentage of box office receipts, often around 30 to 35%, to cover their costs for print, advertising, often co-funded, and exhibition logistics. Theaters themselves would then take roughly 50% of the ticket sales, with the remainder flowing back to the distributor and, eventually, the production entity after recoupment of costs. The film's break-even point, factoring in these splits and the marketing costs, was likely in the range of $40 to $45 million in global box office. Its final worldwide gross of roughly $100 million suggests it achieved profitability in its theatrical window, though the precise accounting of net profits, a famously elusive figure in Hollywood, would depend on the granular details of these distribution agreements and the allocation of overheads. The film's financial legacy is intertwined with Schwarzenegger's own career trajectory. While not the explosive hit that The Terminator would be later in 1984, it contributed to the steady construction of his global action star equity. It proved he could anchor a large-scale fantasy franchise, a data point that would inform future green-lighting decisions for other films. Furthermore, the film's existence as a broadcast and cable television staple throughout the late 80s and 90s provided continuous, low-cost brand exposure for both the character and the star, a form of long-term marketing that is difficult to quantify but essential to cultural capital. The economics of its production also mark a specific moment in time, just before CGI began to radically alter the cost structure of fantasy filmmaking. Every effect in Conan the Destroyer is a physical, mechanical, or optical effect. The crystal chamber, the mirror fight, the miniature temple rising from the sand, the Dago puppet, these were all crafted by hand, requiring significant upfront capital in skilled labor and materials. Today, many of these sequences would be accomplished with digital artists and render farms, a different model of capital allocation favoring post-production software and processing power over workshop space and sculptors. The film, therefore, stands as a financial artifact of a specific technological era in filmmaking. Its budget was a vote of confidence in practical, tangible creation. In the broader portfolio of the Conan franchise, Destroyer served its purpose. It provided a financial return, expanded the audience, and kept the IP active. It did not generate the cultural seismic impact of the first film, but from a studio economic perspective, it was a successful iteration on a proven product. It demonstrated that the underlying asset, the character, the world, the star, could support multiple ventures with slightly different market positions. Its ultimate financial value may be less in its own box office tally and more in its role as a sustaining chapter that helped keep the fires of the barbarian genre burning, contributing to the overall valuation of the Conan intellectual property for decades to come through comics, games, and attempted reboots. The film, in essence, was a profitable maintenance release for a valuable software franchise. The filmmaking technology underpinning Conan the Destroyer is a testament to the final, glorious peak of analog, physical effect filmmaking before the digital wave crested. This was an era where cinematic illusion was engineered from rubber, glass, wood, light, and chemical emulsion, requiring immense upfront capital and skilled craftspeople and time. Director Richard Fleischer, a veteran of large-scale productions like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, approached this not as a digital canvas but as a complex, physical manufacturing process. The primary capture technology was a Panavision Panaflex camera system, likely paired with anamorphic lenses to achieve the film's sweeping, epic 2.35 to 1 widescreen aspect ratio. Anamorphic lenses, with their characteristic horizontal lens flares and slightly softened edges, contributed to the film's mythic, slightly dreamlike visual quality, differentiating it from the stock, grounded feel a spherical lens might have provided. The choice of film stock was crucial. Shooting on 35mm film, the production relied on the inherent grain structure, color latitude, and dynamic range of the chemical emulsion, a technology with over a century of refinement. The cinematography by Jack Cardiff, a legend celebrated for his Technicolor masterpieces, applied a painter's sensibility to lighting these massive sets. His approach was one of control, motivated light sources that defined space and mood. The torch-lit interiors of the castle, the harsh desert sunlight, and the ethereal, cool glow of the crystal chamber were all achieved with large-scale lighting rigs, banks of incandescent or arc lights, diffused through silks or bounce-off reflectors. This was not merely illumination. It was environmental engineering, using photons to carve out believable volume in vast, constructed spaces. The color palette is a strategic piece of visual communication. The early scenes in Shetty's Eye in the desert use warm, earthy tones, ochres, browns, deep reds, grounding the story in a tangible, historical-feeling world. This shifts dramatically upon entering the mystical spaces, the mirror hall and the crystal temple. These sequences are dominated by cool, unnatural colors, blues, purples, crystalline whites, signaling a departure from physical logic into a realm of magic and divine architecture. This deliberate color segmentation is a form of visual wayfinding for the audience, a nonverbal cue about the narrative's shift in stakes and reality. The editing pipeline was a physical, hands-on process. Editors Frank J. Osti and Carl Kress worked with literal strips of celluloid, splicing and taping them together on a flatbed editing machine like a Steenbeck or a KEM. This analog process imposed a discipline of pre-visualization and committed decision-making. Transitions, fades, and timing were locked in during the photochemical process, not adjustable with a slider in software. The film's pacing, the rhythm of its action, was physically crafted, cut by hand. The sound design was built from a library of recorded effects and Foley artistry. The swoosh of a sword, the clank of armor, the roar of Dagoth, the crumbling of the temple, each was a specific sound effect recorded, layered, and mixed on a magnetic double stage. The mix was stereo, a significant upgrade from mono, allowing for directional effects that could immerse the audience in the action, like the sound of arrows whizzing past or the spatial rumble of the awakening god. This auditory engineering was crucial for selling the physicality of the world. The visual effects work represents the crown jewel of the film's technological ambition, all achieved in camera or through optical printing. The mirror sequence is a marvel of precision engineering. It was achieved by building a set with real mirrors, then using carefully choreographed actors and camera placements to create the illusion of infinite recursion. The reflections are real, not composite. The challenge was immense, ensuring no camera, crew, or lighting equipment was visible in any reflection, a logistical puzzle solved through meticulous planning and hidden gaps in the mirror array. The effect's power comes from its tangible reality. The audience senses the actual space, the real shattering glass, which digital compositing, for all its flexibility, can sometimes lack. The Dagoth creature is a masterwork of practical puppetry and shootmation. Designed by makeup and effects legend Carlo Rambaldi of E.T. fame, Dagoth was a large, mechanically animated puppet for some shots and a suit worn by an actor in others. Its movement was a combination of cable-operated mechanisms, hydraulic systems, and the physical performance of the suit actor. The slimy, otherworldly texture of its skin was achieved through layered foam latex and careful paint application. When Dagoth is struck or disintegrates, the effect was likely achieved with pneumatically triggered breakaway sections, bursts of compressed air for particle effects, and reverse photography. This was technology that demanded rehearsal and accepted no undo button. A fail take can mean hours of repair to a one-of-a-kind puppet. The Rising of the Temple from the Lake of Taze is a classic example of forced perspective and miniature work. A detailed miniature of the temple and surrounding terrain was built. The water was likely a combination of poured plaster or clay sculpted to look like receding waves, filmed in time-lapse or with controlled pullback mechanism. The interaction of the full-scale actors with the miniature was achieved through matte painting and optical compositing. A shot of the actors looking awestruck would be filmed against a blue screen. Separately, the miniature would be filmed. In the optical printer, a device that allowed for frame-by-frame rephotography and combination of multiple film elements, the two pieces of film would be combined, with a hand-painted matte painting used to blend the scenes and extend the environment. This process was slow, expensive, and prone to generational loss in image quality, but it was the only way to create such a monumental visual. The magical effects, Akiro's spells, the glowing horn, the energy beams, were created through a combination of practical lighting, gels, filters, light painting directly onto the film during long exposures, and optical printing techniques like traveling mats and bipack contact printing. A glow around an object might be achieved by creating a matte, a high-contrast silhouette of the object, then printing that area with controlled blur and color shift in a subsequent pass through the optical printer. This was digital compositing executed with light, lenses, and chemistry. The film stunts and action sequences were another form of high-risk physical technology. The fight choreography, while not as intricate as later waifu films, relied on the sheer physicality of the performers, stunt doubles, and carefully timed impacts. The use of trampoline for high leaps, air rams for falls, and breakaway props for hits was standard but dangerous. This was human capital operating at the edge of its physical limit, with safety protocols far less comprehensive than today. Every punch, fall, and sword clash represented a potential cost overrun and actor injury and production delay, a risk managed through rigorous rehearsal and the skill of veteran stunt coordinators. Conan the Destroyer stands, therefore, as a museum of late 20th century cinematic engineering. Its technological DNA is one of atoms, not bits. Every spectacle was a physical object built, filmed, and chemically processed. This imposed both constraints, less flexibility in post-production, higher costs for complex changes, and unique virtues, a tangible, tactile presence that resonates with an audience's subconscious understanding of the real. The film's technology is its own form of capital, frozen in celluloid, a specific and unrepeatable confluence of craft, chemistry, and pre-digital ambition. It is a fossil record of how Hollywood built worlds before the universe became code. The production management and studio economics of Conan the Destroyer reveal a sophisticated industrial operation, a meticulously planned campaign to manufacture a myth on schedule and within a financial envelope. This was not a wild, artistic scramble. It was a corporation marshaling hundreds of skilled workers, millions in capital, and a finite resource more precious than gold: time. The production was a partnership between the creative vision of director Richard Fleischer and the formidable production machine of Dino De Laurentiis, a mogul whose name was synonymous with grand-scale international filmmaking. De Laurentiis' role was that of CEO and primary risk-bearing investor. His company provided the capital and the overarching strategic framework to produce a commercially viable sequel that expanded the franchise's market. His decision to greenlight the film was a portfolio allocation, moving capital from other potential projects into this one based on the projected return from the established Conan IP and Schwarzenegger's rising equity. The studio's governance in this case was not a faceless committee but the direct, hands-on control of producer tycoon, a model that allowed for swift decision-making but concentrated creative and financial risk. The logistical scope of the production was immense. Principal photography took place in Mexico, a location choice driven by economic and environmental logic. Mexico offered expansive, varied landscapes, desert, mountains, forests that could stand in for the Hyborian age at a lower cost than building equivalent sets on a soundstage or filming in more expensive European locales. It also provided a skilled but cost-effective local labor pool for construction, catering, and support roles. Managing production of this scale on location, away from the home-based infrastructure of Hollywood, was a monumental task in logistics. It required transporting key cast and crew, establishing reliable communication lines, building temporary workshops for costumes and props, ensuring security for expensive equipment, and navigating local regulations and labor practices. This was a self-contained cinematic city-state erected in the desert, a temporary but complex economy. The scheduling of the shoot was a high-stakes puzzle. With a star of Schwarzenegger's growing stature, his time was a non-renewable asset locked into a strict window. Every day of shooting represented a massive burn rate of capital, salaries for hundreds of people, rental fees for equipment, interest on production loan, and the daily cost of the location itself. Delays due to weather, actor injury, or technical malfunction translated directly into budget overruns. The production manager's role was to sequence the shoot to maximize efficiency, grouping all scenes in a specific set together regardless of their order in the script, scheduling complex effects shots for days when the specialized crew was present, and ensuring that the second unit, handling establishing shots, minor action, was operating in parallel to the main unit to maximize footage per day. The management of the ensemble cast also required nuanced resource allocation. While Schwarzenegger was the lead, the film featured prominent supporting roles and a memorable villain. Managing their schedules, ensuring their availability for reshoots or additional dialogue recording, ADR, and maintaining morale over potentially grueling location shoot were critical soft skills that impacted the hard metrics of the schedule. A disgruntled actor could cause delays. A cohesive, motivated cast could help the production stay on track. The workforce allocation was a pyramid of specialized skills. At the base were the countless carpenters, painters, and laborers building the monumental sets. Above them were the department heads, the director of photography and his lighting and camera crews, the production designer and his art directors, the costume designer and her seamstresses, the makeup and effects teams under Carlo Rambaldi. Coordinating these departments so that the set was ready, lit, dressed, and the actors were costumed and made up at the exact moment the director was ready to shoot required military-level precision. A delay in makeup meant the lighting crew stood idle. A problem with a set piece meant the actors were held in their trailers, their paid time ticking away. This was a symphony of interdependent tasks where one miscue could ripple into costly downtime. The management of the film's technological ambition, as outlined in Step 6, was itself a major production challenge. Effects-heavy sequences like the mirror hole fight, the Dago scenes, and the temple rising were not just artistic endeavors. They were logistical milestones with their own critical paths. These sequences required the effects team to be on set for days or weeks, often working before and after the main unit to prepare and break down complex rigs. The decision to use practical effects over nascent digital ones, which were in their infancy in 1983-84, was a management choice as much as a creative one. It committed the production to a path of physical construction and in-camera capture, which offered predictable, if high, costs and a tangible result, but less flexibility for fixes in post-production. This placed immense pressure on the effects teams to deliver flawless performances on the day, as reshooting a complex puppet sequence could be prohibitively expensive. The financial governance extended to post-production. The editing, sound mixing, scoring, and optical effects work were all conducted under the watchful eye of the producers, who were monitoring the film's final form against test audience reactions and the agreed-upon tone, the lighter, PG-friendly adventure. Reshoots, while costly, could be ordered if a scene wasn't working. The final cut of the film was a negotiated document between directorial vision and commercial imperative. De Laurentiis, having financed the venture, held ultimate approval. The distribution deal with Universal Pictures was a key piece of financial engineering. By partnering with a major studio for distribution, De Laurentiis' production company offloaded the immense cost and complexity of marketing and physically getting the film into theaters worldwide. Universal's distribution network, their relationships with theater chains, their international offices, their marketing apparatus, was a service purchase with a percentage of the box office gross. This split the ultimate risk. If the film failed, Universal would lose its marketing investment and distribution fees, but De Laurentiis would bear the larger loss of the production budget. This partnership model allowed an independent production to access the scale of a major studio's pipeline. The studio's marketing department then became an extension of the production management. Their campaign had to accurately position the product that had been manufactured. The lighter tone meant the marketing had to emphasize adventure and spectacle over grim brutality. Trailers highlighted the ensemble, the creatures, and the quest, not Conan's personal vengeance. This alignment between production output and marketing message was critical for meeting box office projections. In essence, the making of Conan the Destroyer was a feat of large-scale project management akin to constructing a bridge or launching a satellite. It required the coordination of disparate human and material resources across international borders under relentless time pressure toward a single, cohesive creative and commercial objective. The studio economics dictated the constraints, budget, rating, star availability, and the production management executed within them, navigating 1,000 daily decisions that collectively determined whether the $18 million investment would yield a return or become a spectacular write-off. The film's existence as a finished, released product is a testament to the fact that, for all its mythological content, it was a product of a very modern, very disciplined, and very risky form of industrial enterprise. The historical and scientific accuracy of Conan the Destroyer operates on a fascinating hybrid plane. It is not bound by the literal records of any real-world civilization, yet it is meticulously constructed from the shattered archaeological fragments of many, blended with the internal logic of Robert E. Howard Hyborian Age. Its accuracy is not to documented history, but to a synthesized, emotionally resonant mythology that feels ancient, coherent, and grounded in a kind of visceral, anthropological truth. This is world building as an act of speculative archaeology, where research integrity serves not to recreate a specific past, but to invent a past that carries the emotional and tactile weight of reality. The film's foundation is Howard's literary creation, a pseudo-historical period set between the sinking of Atlantis and the rise of known ancient civilizations. Howard himself was a voracious reader of history, anthropology, and mythology, and he wove elements from countless cultures, Sumerians, based on ancient Celts, Stygians, ancient Egypt, Hyperboreans, Vendians, India, into his tapestry. The film's production design, led by production designer Pierluigi Bossele, continues a synthetic approach. Shedizar, the city of wickedness, is not a copy of Babylon or Rome, but an architectural pastiche. Its towering ziggurats and ornate palaces borrow from Mesopotamian and Persian aesthetics, while its bustling, decadent street life evokes a Hollywood vision of ancient Damascus or Baghdad. This is not a failure of accuracy, but a deliberate strategy. The goal is to trigger the audience's collective subconscious of ancient, opulent, corrupt civilization using visual shorthand from multiple historical touchpoints. The design achieves a plausible density and lived-in grime that sells a city as a real, functioning place, even if its specific genealogy is fictional. The costumes, by actress and designer John Bloomfield, follow a similar principle. Conan's signature loincloth and harness are pure Howardian iconography, a fantasy simplification of ancient warrior garb. The costumes for Queen Taimus and her court, however, draw more directly from historical inspiration. Tarami's headdresses and gowns suggest a blend of Byzantine and Assyrian royal attire, heavy with symbolic jewelry and layered fabrics meant to denote rank and untouchable power. Zula's costume, with its fur, leather, and tribal markings, communicates steppe nomad or African warrior without pinning her to a specific tribe. This costuming language is instantly legible, allowing the audience to understand character and culture at a glance, a crucial narrative efficiency in a film with limited time for exposition. The film's approach to technology and engineering is anachronistic but internally consistent. The world operates at a pre-industrial, muscle and magic level. Swords are bronze or iron, architecture is stone and mortar, travel is by horse or foot. Yet, the existence of advanced engineering is explained through lost knowledge or divine intervention. The crystal temple that rises from the sands is impossible by any known ancient engineering standard, but within the film's logic, it is a work of forgotten, God-touched civilization. Its design, with perfect geometric crystals and concealed mechanical traps, follows a logic of sacred geometry and puzzle box architecture seen in legends of ancient tombs. The mirror chamber, while fantastical, uses a technology, mirrors, that did exist in antiquity, polished metal, here exaggerated to a mythic scale. This treats ancient capability not as primitive, but as differently focused, capable of wondrous achievements now lost to time, a common trope in both fantasy and certain historical mystery schools. Where the film engages in a form of real scientific accuracy is in its portrayal of materials and physics at a human scale. The heft of the weapons, the way characters strain against physical obstacles, the impact of blows, all are grounded in believable, non-superhuman physicality, Conan's immense strength notwithstanding. The sound design sells the weight of a stone door sliding shut, the crack of wood, the crunch of sand underfoot. This tactile, sensory accuracy is what anchors a fantasy. The audience believes in the magic because they first believe in the stone. The film's depiction of magic and religion is treated with a kind of anthropological accuracy. Magic is not Harry Potter-style spellcasting. It is ritualistic, costly, and tied to specific artifacts and bloodlines. Akiro's magic is shown as limited, requiring concentration and components. The Queen's ritual to summon Dagoth is not a flashy light show but a solemn, ceremonial act with chanting, specific artifacts, the horn, and a blood sacrifice. This treats magic as a technology in its own right, a poorly understood, dangerous technology with strict operational protocols and catastrophic failure modes. This ritualistic presentation mirrors how ancient cultures actually practice their religions, as precise, formulaic interactions with unpredictable divine forces. The film's greatest concession to cinematic necessity over any form of accuracy is in its language and dialogue. Everyone speaks modern English, with various accents denoting regional origin, a necessary contrivance for audience comprehension. There is no attempt at archaic speech. However, the naming conventions maintain the Howardian and historical fusion, Conan, Gaelic roots, Zula, possibly Zulu-inspired, Malik, Semitic for angel or messenger, ironically, Thamis, Dagoth, all sound plausibly ancient and foreign without belonging to a real language. This creates a consistent sonic texture. In terms of cultural and behavioral accuracy, the film reflects 1980s Hollywood perspectives more than ancient ones. The portrayal of primitive tribes, the virgin sacrifice trope, The exoticized otherness of the settings are filtered through a modern, commercial lens. It is not a documentary about ancient attitudes. However, within its own frame, it accurately portrays the core power dynamics of presumed ancient kingdoms, absolute monarchy, the use of marriage and virginity as political capital, the reliance on mercenary force, and the intertwining of state and religious authority. Queen Tarami's manipulation of sacred prophecy for political gain is a timeless historical constant. The film's educational credibility, therefore, lies not in teaching facts about the Hittites or the Sumerians, but in demonstrating how mythologies are built. It is a case study in cultural synthesis. A student of world myth would recognize the composite parts: the quest for a sacred object, the golden fleece, the Holy Grail, the sleeping god, King Arthur, Bran the Blessed, the virgin sacrifice motif found in countless myths, the treacherous royal advisor. Conan the Destroyer functions as a living repository of these archetypes, repackaged in a kinetic, visual form. It teaches, indirectly, about the structure of hero myths, the role of the trickster, Malik, the wise old mentor, Akiro, and the fresh old guardian. Its accuracy is to the deep structure of story, not the surface details of history. Ultimately, the film's commitment is to a visceral, emotional, and aesthetic truth rather than a factual one. The research done by its designers was in service of building a world that feels excavated, not invented. The dirt under the fingernails of the extras, the weathered texture of the props, the believable social hierarchies, these are the details that create the illusion of historical accuracy. It is a simulation of antiquity, engineered for emotional impact and narrative momentum, proving that in fantasy, the most important accuracy is often to the audience's feeling of authenticity, not to the archive. The film succeeds because it respects its own internal laws and builds its wonders on a foundation of tangible, relatable human scale and struggle. The cinematography and visual engineering of Conan the Destroyer is a masterclass in constructing a mythic reality through the deliberate, physical manipulation of light, composition, and color, a pre-digital art form where every frame was a calculated negotiation between ambition and the immutable laws of optics and chemistry. Director of photography Jack Cardiff, a legend whose career was built on painting with light for Technicolor epics, approached this fantasy not as a cartoon but as a historical epic of an imagined past. His methodology was one of motivated, expressive lighting that defined space, mood, and hierarchy. In the vast throne room of Queen Taimis, the lighting is high-key but layered. Key lights simulate sunlight pouring from high windows, creating strong directional shafts that pierce the hazy atmosphere, an effect achieved with powerful arc lamps and smoke or dust particles in the air. This creates a sense of scale and divine authority, with Taimis often positioned in or near these god beams, associating her with a borrowed, theatrical power. The fill light is carefully controlled to maintain shadow detail in the deep recesses of the set, revealing the intricate carvings on columns and the textures of costumes, an exercise in preserving production value through exposure. This is not flat television lighting. It is sculptural, using contrast and shadow to carve three-dimensional forms out of the two-dimensional film plane. The color science of the film is its most potent narrative tool, engineered through a combination of production design, lighting gels, and photochemical timing in the lab. The film establishes a grounded, earthy palette for the world of men and deserts. The sequences in Shedazar and the open wilderness are dominated by warm ambers, deep browns, sun-bleached yellows, and the rust red of canyon rocks. These colors communicate heat, antiquity, and tangible reality. They are achieved through the natural color of the locations, the costuming and set dressing, and potentially warming filters on the lens or during printing. This palette grounds a fantasy, providing a believable baseline from which the magic can depart. The departure is radical and intentional. The entrance into the mirror chamber and the crystal temple triggers a complete color space shift. The world becomes cool, unnatural, and psychologically distant. Blues, purples, icy whites, and ethereal aquas dominate. This is achieved through a multi-pronged approach. The sets themselves were built with these color materials, tinted crystals, blue-tinted mirrors. The lighting used strong blue and purple gels, and the lab timing would have further pushed the cyan and magenta layers of the film negative. This isn't just decoration, it's environmental psychology. The cool colors lower the emotional temperature, creating a sense of awe, unease, and otherworldliness. They signal to the audience that the rules of physics and morality are different here. The composition geometry of Cardiff frames is classical and purposeful. He frequently employs the anamorphic widescreen aspect ratio to emphasize horizontal grandeur, sweeping desert vistas, the sprawling width of the temple chamber, the elongated procession of the Queen's court. This format also allows for powerful foreground-background relationships within a single shot. In the mirror fight, Conan is often framed centrally, his massive form a stable anchor amidst the chaotic, repeating reflections that stretch to infinity in the background. This centers the viewer in the disorientation. Deep focus is used strategically to keep both the hero in the foreground and the treacherous environment behind him in sharp relief, emphasizing the constant threat of the space itself. In more intimate moments, such as Conan's conversations with Jenna, the composition tightens, using medium shots and close-ups with softer focus on the background to highlight the emotional exchange and the princess's growing awareness. The sensor dynamics of the era were purely chemical. The film stock, likely a fine-grained stock like Kodak's 5247, had a specific latitude, its ability to hold detail in shadows and highlights. Cardiff's lighting had to operate within this dynamic range. He couldn't simply raise the shadows in post-production. He had to light the set to ensure the contrast ratio between the brightest highlight and the deepest shadow fell within the stock's developable range. This required exquisite precision. The gleaming highlights on a sword blade and the dark shadow under a character's cloak had to be meticulously balanced at the moment of exposure. This constraint bred a discipline and pre-visualization that is often absent in today's digitally captured fix-it-in-post environment. The result is an image with a rich, organic texture and a color depth that feels baked into the world, not applied on top of it. The visual engineering of the effect sequences, as discussed, is inseparable from the cinematography. Lighting the Dagoth creature was a specialized challenge. It required light's position within the puppet's mouth or eyes to create a menacing inner glow, while also ensuring the slimy, textured surface of its foam latex skin was lit to reveal its grotesque detail without looking like a flat prop. For the temple rising from the sand, the miniature had to be lit to match the lighting of the full-scale plate of the actors, considering the direction, quality, and color temperature of the sun. A mismatch of even a few hundred Kelvin in color temperature would break the illusion, revealing the shot as a composite. This required precise communication between the director of photography, the effects cinematographer, and the optical printer team. The movement of the camera itself is often stately and deliberate, befitting the epic tone. Dolly moves and slow pans emphasize scale and discovery. The camera frequently cranes up to reveal the expanse of a set or tilts down to follow characters descending into a crypt. Handheld photography is used sparingly, reserved for moments of chaotic action like the ambush sequence, where the shaky, immersive camera work puts the audience in the middle of the fray. This contrast between stable, composed frames and chaotic motion is a form of visual punctuation, guiding the viewer's emotional rhythm. The final, critical layer of visual engineering occurred in the photochemical laboratory. The color timer, working with a cinematographer, made scene-by-scene adjustments to the print's color and density. This process, called grading, was done by adjusting the light passed through the negative onto the print stock for each of the three color layers: cyan, magenta, yellow. They could make a scene warmer, cooler, darker, or lighter, but within global parameters. They couldn't isolate and change the color of a single object as in digital grading. This meant the visual look had to be largely achieved on set, with the lab work serving as fine-tuning and ensuring consistency across the film. The cinematography of Conan the Destroyer is, therefore, a testament to a holistic, craft-based approach to image making. It understands that light is not just illumination, but information. Color is not just decoration, but emotion. Composition is not just framing, but hierarchy and focus. Every visual choice, from the temperature of a gel to the angle of a dolly track, was a conscious investment in building a believable, immersive, and emotionally resonant unreal world. It is visual storytelling executed with the rigor of an engineer and the soul of a painter, a dying art form captured in celluloid amber. The sound design and music production of Conan the Destroyer function as a film's unseen nervous system and emotional circulatory system, a parallel layer of engineering that builds a world, dictates pace, and manipulates psychology with the precision of a master architect. This is not merely auditory decoration. It is a carefully budgeted capital investment in emotion, where every clash, whisper, and chord progression is a deliberate asset deployed to secure the audience's belief in the unreal. The soundscape is built on a foundation of tangible, recorded reality. The Foley artist performed a symphony of created noises. The specific crunch of sand under a sandal versus a thud on stone, the rasp of leather armor during a fight, the clatter of a dropped gold coin, the wet tear of monster's flesh. These sounds are not generic library effects. They are bespoke recordings that marry perfectly with the visual action, selling the physicality and texture of the Hyborian world. This tactile sound bed is what makes a fantasy feel grounded. The mixing architecture of the film, released in stereo, was a significant feature for 1984. It allowed for directional sound placement and movement. The whoosh of an arrow could travel from the left speaker to the right, tracing its flight across the screen. The roar of Dagos could seem to emanate from a specific point in space and then envelop the listener. This use of the stereo field created a sense of environmental envelopment that was a step beyond mono's centralized sound, placing the audience inside the action rather than merely observing it. The dynamic range, the difference between the quietest whisper and the loudest explosion, was carefully managed to produce impact. The silent tension of the mirror hole, broken by the sudden, shattering cacophony of glass, is a classic use of dynamic contrast to shock and release. The sound design for the magical and monstrous elements required its own form of innovation. Dagotha's roars and guttural noises were likely created by manipulating and layering animal sounds, lions, bears, elephants, slowed down, pitch-shifted, and processed through analog filters and reverb units. The sound of the crystal temple rising might combine the groan of massive stones, recorded from real geological shifts or building demolitions, with a crystalline shimmer of broken glass and high-frequency synthesized tones. Akiro spells would use elements like rushing wind, ethereal chimes, and distorted vocalizations. These sounds were crafted in an analog studio with tape machines, synthesizers, and early digital processors like the Lexicon 224 Reverb, which could create otherworldly spaces. The creation of these sounds was a cost center for post-production, requiring specialist sound designers and dedicated studio time. The music production, composed and conducted by the incomparable Basil Poledouris, is a film's emotional and thematic backbone. Poledouris, who scored the first film, returns not to simply repeat, but to evolve the sound. His score is a monumental work for full symphony orchestra, recorded with a power and clarity that feels both ancient and timeless. His methodology was to create leitmotifs, recurring musical themes associated with characters, places, or ideas. Conan's theme, a driving, percussive march of brass and strings, is a declaration of indomitable will. It is muscular, direct, and heroic, often underscored with pounding timpani that mimic a heartbeat or marching feet. For Queen Taramis in the realm of Shedazar, Poledouris employs a more ornate, regal, yet sinister palette. Sweeping strings and regal horns are laced with darker, more dissonant harmonies and exotic percussion, tambourines, sistrums that hinder corruption and decadence beneath the opulence. The theme for the mystical quest, associated with the horn and the temple, is more awe-inspiring and mysterious, using choral elements, wordless voices, harp glissandos, and shimmering string textures to evoke the divine and the unknown. Poledouris' genius is in his fusion of the classical romantic tradition with primitive, rhythmic force. The battle music is not just chaotic noise, it is structured, propulsive, and layered with ethnic percussion instruments that feel historically adjacent. He uses anvil struck as percussion, evoking the forges of war. The score's recording was a major financial and logistical undertaking. Hiring a 90-piece orchestra, likely the National Philharmonic Orchestra in London, for multiple 3-hour sessions at a premier recording studio like Abbey Road or Anvil Studios, represented a significant line item in the post-production budget. Every minute of studio time, every musician's union fee, and the cost of the conductor, copyists, and engineers was part of the sonic investment. The score was recorded to multitrack tape, allowing the music editor and mixer to later balance the sections, strings, brass, woodwinds, percussion, against the dialogue and sound effects in the final dub. The sound editing process was the final, critical synthesis. In the dub stage, the dialogue editor, sound effects editor, and music editor, under the supervision of the director and a supervising sound editor, would blend their 3 separate tracks into a cohesive whole. This was an act of delicate balance and narrative emphasis. In a dialogue scene, the music would be mixed lower, serving as subtle emotional underscore. In an action sequence, the sound effects and music would swell, often ducking the dialogue entirely to let the visceral audio take over. The iconic moment when Conan shatters the mirrors is a perfect triad. The visual of breaking glass, the sound effect of 1,000 panes shattering, and Poledouris' score reaching a crashing, heroic crescendo. This alignment of sensory inputs creates a peak emotional and cathartic moment that is greater than the sum of its parts. The film's use of silence is as important as its use of sound. The moments before a trap is sprung, or when the characters behold an awesome sight, are often marked by a total drop in sound, maybe with only a faint wind or the crackle of a torch. This creates dramatic tension and allows the subsequent explosion of sound or music to have maximum impact. It is a lesson in auditory economics. You must create a deficit of sound to make the audience crave, and then truly feel its return. The final mixed soundtrack was then married to the picture in a process called marrying, creating the final print that would be sent to theaters. The quality of this audio track was a direct contributor to the film's perceived production value. A thin, poorly mixed soundtrack would make the film feel cheap, regardless of the visuals. The rich, layered, powerful audio of Conan the Destroyer completed the illusion, convincing the audience they were in a world of weight, depth, and epic consequence. In this way, the sound and music were not post-production afterthoughts. They were foundational pillars of the film's architectural integrity, a massive allocation of creative and financial capital that yielded an immeasurable return in audience belief and emotional engagement. The marketing strategy and audience analytics for Conan the Destroyer present a clear case study in franchise management and demographic pivoting based on data from the first film's performance. The campaign was engineered to achieve one primary goal: widen the aperture of the audience from the niche, adult-focused fans of Conan the Barbarian to a broader, younger, family-friendly demographic while retaining the core action fantasy appeal. This was a calculated risk, a deliberate repositioning of the product in the marketplace. The primary data point was the R rating and grim tone of Barbarian. While successful, it inherently limited its scale. The studio's marketing analytics, likely informed by exit polls and box office demographics, suggested a significant untapped market in the teenage and young adult segment that was drawn to fantasy, fueled by the success of films like Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark, but barred by age or put off by extreme violence. The decision to aim for a PG rating was a foundational marketing strategy, dictating the content of the film itself and, by extension, every promotional asset. The marketing mix was classic mid-80s studio blockbuster fare. The centerpiece was a theatrical trailer, a 2 to 3 minute sizzle reel, designed to broadcast a new tone. This trailer strategically minimized the brooding revenge narrative of the first film. Instead, it highlighted the ensemble, Conan, and a hilarious thief, a beautiful warrior, a cunning wizard, the spectacular set pieces, the mirror chamber, Dagoth, the temple rise, and the quest narrative. The music was heroic, the pacing quick, and the voiceover enthusiastic, promising the ultimate adventure. It sold spectacle and fun over mythic severity. This trailer was placed in front of other action and fantasy films and advertised heavily on television, the dominant media channel of the era. The print campaign followed suit. The iconic poster art by legendary artist Frank Frazetta, or in his style, was a key marketing asset. It depicted a heroic, cleanly muscular Conan standing triumphantly with sword raised, flanked by Zula, Malik, and Akiro, with Jenna before him and the monstrous Dagoth looming in the background. This single image communicated the film's core promise, a team-based adventure with an iconic hero, a monster, and a princess. It was colorful, dynamic, and less darkly sensual than the poster for the first film, again signaling the tonal shift. This art was reproduced on one-sheets, in newspaper ads, and in magazine spreads, particularly in genre magazines like Starlog and comic books, targeting the core fan base, and in more mainstream publications to catch the wider audience. The demographic targeting was two-pronged. First, retain the existing male 18 to 34 fantasy or action fan through the Conan IP and Schwarzenegger's presence. Second, capture the new targets, younger teenagers, both male and female, through the PG rating and the inclusion of a young princess character, and families through the adventure comedy elements personified by Malik. The marketing subtly downplayed the more horrific elements, like the sacrificial ritual, in favor of the adventurous and magical ones. The CPM, cost per mil, logic of the TV ad buy would have been analyzed to ensure efficient reach against these demographic groups, favoring programming with high U viewership. There was likely little to no ARB testing in the modern digital sense. Marketing decisions were based on industry experience, tracking of similar films, and the reactions of test audiences. Pre-release test screenings would have been crucial for gauging the new tone's effectiveness. If audiences responded well to Malik's humor and the lighter touch, it validated the strategy. If they felt it betrayed the first film, the marketing might have been adjusted to emphasize the action and spectacle more heavily as a counterbalance. The marketing also leveraged Schwarzenegger's growing celebrity, though he was not yet the global megastar he would become. Interviews with him in magazines and on talk shows focus on the physicality of the role, the stunts, and the scale of the production, positioning him as a modern-day epic hero. The international marketing strategy would have been tailored by Universal's local offices, but the core assets, the trailer, the poster, the star, were universal. The film's title itself, The Destroyer, was a marketing choice. It was active, powerful, and hinted at a scale of conflict even greater than Barbarian. It promised a progression, a bigger threat. Post-release, the marketing analytics would have shifted to tracking box office performance by region and demographic. Strong opening weekend numbers among the younger demographic would have confirmed the pivot's success, while a weaker hold might have indicated a failure to fully satisfy the core fans. The film's performance on home video would have been its own separate marketing and analytical challenge, requiring packaging and promotional spots for video stores that emphasize its rewatchability and adventure quotient. The long-tail marketing of the film occurred organically through its repeated broadcasts on cable television, HBO, Showtime, throughout the late 80s and 90s. Each airing was a form of brand reinforcement, embedding the film in the cultural memory of a generation. The marketing strategy, in retrospect, can be seen as a necessary but imperfect experiment. It successfully broadened the audience and delivered a financial return. However, some analytical criticism suggests it may have diluted the unique, brutal identity of the Conan brand that the first film established, potentially limiting its long-term franchise potential in favor of short-term gain. The film became, for many, a fun 80s fantasy adventure, while Barbarian retained its status as a cult classic of serious sword and sorcery. This divergence in reception is a direct result of the marketing and production strategy to pivot the product position in the market, a calculated business decision that traded niche cultural capital for broader, but perhaps shallower, commercial profit. The campaign stands as a textbook example of how a sequel's marketing is not just about selling a film, but about strategically managing and redirecting the trajectory of an entire intellectual property. The critical reception, award trajectory, and legacy forecast for Conan the Destroyer paint a portrait of a film that succeeded commercially by pivoting strategically, yet paid a price in cultural capital and critical esteem, existing in the long shadow of its more austere predecessor. Upon its release in 1984, critical reviews were largely mixed and negative, a stark contrast to the more respectfully received Conan the Barbarian. Many critics of the time judged it against the first film's operatic gravity and found it wanting. They criticized the lighter tone, the increased emphasis on comedy, particularly Malik's antics, and the perceived simplification of Conan's character from a force of primal vengeance to a more straightforward, if still formidable, adventure hero. The critique often centered on the film's perceived identity crisis. Was it a serious mythological epic or a romp for teenagers? This critical divide highlighted the risk of the tonal pivot. While the box office returns validated the commercial strategy, the critical reception underscored a loss of auteur's credibility. The film was seen as a product, well manufactured, but lacking the distinctive, personal vision that John Milius brought to the first installment. In the ecosystem of 1984 cinema, it was overshadowed not only by its own predecessor but by other landmark films of that year, most notably James Cameron's The Terminator, which ironically starred Schwarzenegger in a role that would definitively cement his icon status with a far more potent fusion of technology and myth. Destroyer was viewed as a competent, mid-tier studio fantasy, not a groundbreaking event. Its award recognition was minimal, reflective of its genre and its reception. It received no major Oscar nominations. Its primary arena for awards was in the specialized fields of fantasy and horror, such as the Saturn Awards, where it might have been nominated for Best Fantasy Film, Costume, or Makeup, categories that acknowledge its technical craft in creature and production design. Any wins in such circles would have been a nod to the skilled artisanship of Carlo Rambaldi's team and the production designers, not to the film's narrative or directorial achievements. This award's profile cemented its status as a craft film, respected for its engineering but not for its artistry in the eyes of the mainstream critical establishment. The film's legacy is complex and has evolved over the ensuing decades. In the immediate aftermath, it served its purpose as a profitable sequel and helped sustain Schwarzenegger's leading man status. However, its long-term cultural valuation has been bifurcated. For a generation of children and young teenagers who saw it on cable or video in the mid to late 80s, Destroyer holds a potent nostalgic value. It is remembered fondly as a fun, thrilling, and accessible fantasy adventure, the Conan film you could watch with less parental concern. Its set pieces, the Mirror Chamber, the Crystal Temple, Dagoth, are memorable spectacles from childhood. In this sphere, it achieved its goal. It became a gateway film into the fantasy genre for many. For hardcore fans of Robert E. Howard's literature and adherents of the first film's grim philosophy, Destroyer is often viewed as a dilution, a commercialized offshoot that softened the edges of a fundamentally hard character. It is a sellout sequel, the moment the franchise chose market over mythos. This perspective is relegated to a lesser status in the canon of sword and sorcery cinema, a fun but ultimately inessential chapter compared to the foundational Barbarian. From a film industry legacy perspective, Destroyer stands as a clear marker in the evolution of the fantasy blockbuster. It represents the tail end of the practical effects-driven, location-shot epic, before CGI began to democratize and transform the genre. It is a fossil of a specific production methodology. Its financial performance also provided a data point on franchise management, that tonal pivots to reach a wider audience could yield profit but might incur a cost in brand integrity and critical cachet. This is a lesson studios have grappled with repeatedly. The forecast for its legacy is one of enduring, if niche, appreciation. It is unlikely to be critically re-evaluated as a masterpiece. However, its value as a cultural artifact is secure. It is a prime example of 1980s high-concept fantasy filmmaking, a time capsule of pre-CGI ambition, and a key entry in the filmography of Arnold Schwarzenegger, showcasing his early ability to anchor a large-scale spectacle. Its legacy is also tied to the long, dormant struggle of the Conan IP in Hollywood. The film's mixed results contributed to a cooling on major Conan production for years, as studios wrestled with how to reconcile the character's brutal origins with the demands of a blockbuster budget. Later attempts to revive the franchise have often struggled with this same dichotomy. Destroyer thus remains a reference point, a case study in one approach to the problem. In the digital streaming era, its legacy is one of consistent, low-cost utility. It is a reliable title in the streaming library of fantasy and 80s nostalgia, generating micro-royalties and maintaining brand visibility with new generations. Its simple, adventure-driven plot and iconic visuals make it easily consumable and algorithmically recommendable. It has found its mature market position not as a revered classic, but as a beloved, rewatchable artifact of a specific moment in pop culture history, a film that traded the aspiration for timeless myth in exchange for becoming a perfectly encapsulated piece of 1984. Its ultimate legacy is that of successful commercial product that fulfilled its corporate mandate, entertained millions, and now serves as a warm, familiar monument to the practical magic and straightforward storytelling of its era. Conan the Destroyer concludes not with a roar of apocalyptic triumph, but with a quiet, decisive sound of a man walking away from a throne. This final choice is the film's ultimate thesis on the harmony and the eternal tension between art, technology, and capital. Conan's refusal of queenship is a rejection of the institutionalized power system that sought to use him as a tool. He turns his back on the ultimate symbol of consolidated capital and control, choosing instead the open road, the uncertain venture of his own life, and the loyal companions earned through shared trial. This is a barbarian as the ultimate free agent, the entrepreneur whose only equity is his skill, his will, and his freedom. The film, in its totality, is a vast assembly of these three forces. The ART is in the mythic yearning it depicts, the ache for lost love, the desire for legacy, the timeless structure of the heroic quest. It is in the raw, emotional core of Conan's motivation, however manipulated, and in the archetypal resonance of its characters and conflicts. The technology is the immense, tangible machinery of its creation. The Panavision camera is capturing the light on hand-sculpted sets, the hydraulics animating Dagota's foam latex form, the optical printers weaving miniature and matte painting into a seamless illusion, the symphony orchestra giving voice to ancient struggles. This was capital converted into physical wonder, a pre-digital cathedral built to house a dream. The capital is the $18 million wager, the studio economics that dictated a tonal pivot to PG, the marketing campaign designed to reposition a franchise, the distribution deal that piped the finished product into theaters worldwide. It is the risk ledger where art and technology meet the market, where creative ambition is weighed against box office projections and demographic analyses. Conan the Destroyer may not represent a perfect synthesis. Its art was sometimes compromised for commercial accessibility. Its technology, while magnificent, was of an era about to be rendered obsolete. Its capital was deployed for safe return rather than visionary gamble. Yet, in its very being, it demonstrates a necessary entanglement of these three spheres. You cannot have the Crystal Temple without the budget to build it. You cannot have Basil Poledouris' score without the capital to hire an orchestra. You cannot have the myth without the technology to make it visible and the capital to bring it to an audience. The film's enduring lesson is about the flow of value between these domains. The artistic vision attracts the capital. The capital funds the technology. The technology realizes the art, which then returns value, financial, cultural, emotional, back to the investors, both monetary and spiritual. Conan's journey mirrors this. His artistic desire to resurrect Valeria attracts the capital of Queen Tiamis. That capital funds the technology of the quest, his team, their weapons, their passage. The technology of his strength and leadership realizes the artistic goal of retrieving the horn, only to reveal the corrupted nature of the capital that funded it. In the end, he severs the loop, taking only the personal, artistic growth and the technological bonds of his team, leaving the tainted capital behind. He chooses a different economy, one of experience and loyalty. For us, the audience, the film leaves a lingering contemplation on the nature of the stories we consume. They are never just stories. They are industrial products, financial instruments, and technological showcases, all in service of delivering an emotional and intellectual experience. To watch Conan the Destroyer with this awareness is to appreciate it not merely as a fantasy adventure, but as a fossilized moment in a continuous, global process. The process of turning imagination, through applied resources and economic courage, into shared memory. It is a testament to the fact that every film, from the most profound art house piece to the pulpiest spectacle, is a miraculous alignment of dream, engineering, and coin. Conan walks off into his future, his destiny still his own to forge. And the film itself remains a permanent vault holding the frozen assets of 1984's ambition, ready to pay dividends of nostalgia and analysis for as long as there are eyes to see and minds to decode the business and beauty of cinema. If you found this deep dive meaningful, my literature-loving friends, consider liking and subscribing so we can keep decoding the business and beauty of cinema together.